Hello, how you going? I'm back. As you can tell from the background, I'm gonna do some sewing today and I'm very excited about it. Can you see me? I've had this project in mind for a while because that's just how I do things. I just think of things and then I never make them until it's at the point where I'm like, I really should make that thing, and today is one of those days. Anyway, I had this idea a few months ago when I saw this dress for sale. This is a dress from a Uniqlo and Marimekko collab from I don't know, years ago? When this collaboration came out, I wanted to buy one of these muumuus, but I couldn't bring myself to do it because I wasn't sure if I wanted to fully embrace the art teacher vibe. Anyway, this was for sale a few months ago at Venla and I saw it. I decided that I wanted it, but I wanted to think about a project to do first to transform it into something that I would wear more regularly than a muumuu. Not to say there's anything wrong with a muumuu, it's just girl got a little waist, she got to take advantage of that, okay? Rather than just buying it straight off the bat, I decided to go home, sleep on it, think about it, try and come up with an idea for a project, and that's exactly what I did. And I did that by scrolling through Pinterest. I am not really a Pinterest gal. I am being very late to the party on Pinterest, mostly because I felt like for so long it was just about trendy stuff, and I have a natural aversion to anything too trendy, so I just kind of left it. I just let it be. I didn't want to get involved with that because it doesn't feel natural to me. So anyway, I went home and I scrolled through and I found some inspiration on Pinterest, which was this matching set right here and this other one. And I can't remember the brand right now, but I'll insert it now. Here you go. Yeah, so that's what we're gonna do today. I made this sketch, which shows kind of what it starts like, and then the idea of having this little top and this little skirt. I'm going through a bit of a phase right now too where I'm trying to avoid putting zippers in too many things. I'm exploring alternative fastenings to zippers. I don't know, it's just a personal project. Cool, thanks for being here. I'm going to try and get this done before Christmas because I want to wear this on Christmas Day to Christmas lunch. Here in Australia, yeah, we do things upside down. It's hot here, it's summertime. Yes, Christmas is a summer thing in Australia. This is a bit of a self-drafting project. And when I do any sort of self-drafting or any sewing really, I like to wear something that I can easily try stuff on over the top or pin to. Today I'm wearing this little denim jumpsuit situation, which I don't think is going to be very conducive to this sort of form-fitting top that I want to make. So I'm going to be right back. I'm going to get changed. I'll see you guys in a quick second. All right, I'm changed. Yes, I made this top. Thanks for asking. You can go watch the video here. Now that we're ready, let's get started with the project. To start off with, I decided to cut the dress just under the sleeve, which was going to give me enough fabric for the top and leave plenty for the skirt. I also cut open the side seam all the way up the sleeve, which was going to give me a relatively flat piece of fabric to work with for the top. I got out this other top I made recently, which has a similar shape to what I'm going for, and used it as a bit of a template. And I traced out a rough cutting line for the top, and then I just went for it. Neck minute. She had indeed fucked it up. Okay. I've made the first adventurous cut. And, oh yeah. Wow, that's actually working better than I thought. I'm really annoyed at myself that we didn't buy a house with better lighting. This is why I like to wear activewear while I'm doing sewing projects, because then I can just be a mannequin and I can just pin shit to my own clothing while I'm figuring out the stuff. All right, I think this neckline actually has to come over the collarbone just because there's gonna be a tie around the back and I need it to be high enough so that it doesn't make weird holes. If you are new to sewing or self-drafting or whatever, then let me share some thoughts. So as you can see, as I've pinned this on me right now, the fabric already wants to fall on my body in a certain way. And you can see that it's kind of sticking out here and here. I do this so that I can figure out, let me just get a clip. I like to work this way so that I can figure out exactly where I need the darts to be to make sure that I can take up that excess fabric and shape the garment exactly the way that I'm going to wear it. I am very limited boobage, so I can get away with not wearing a bra a lot of the time, which is a very nice way to be, and I'm very grateful for that. Although I did suffer much teasing from, not from anyone at school, just mostly my family members. Thanks family. Then I can just sort of fold the fabric and double check how it's fitting. And then what I'll do, rather than just pinning straight up on the other side, I'm going to take this off and I'll fold it back in half. I'll make the marking of where this dart should be and I'll transfer it exactly onto the other side so that it's symmetrical. It's tempting to just sort of pin and go, but I'm really trying hard to make sure that these garments that I'm making have an element of refinement to them, because I am someone who likes to rush through things and just like get shit done, and I don't always spend enough time refining it. Here I am in fast forward, just transferring all those dart markings on both sides and pinning them before stitching them together. I recommend when sewing darts to always start at the top of the dart, 1 or 2 stitches away from the fabric without back stitching, because it gets you the cleanest kind of point. You always want to tie off the tops of your darts rather than do a back stitch, because then when you press it out and you fold it through, it makes for a really nice, flat, lovely point. So I'm going to press that and then we'll see how we're doing. Tidied up that bottom edge, but then I had an idea that I could put a little side seam in here so that I can reuse this edge that's already been finished. Just a very convenient bit of finished raw edge already. So what I'm going to do is just hold it up to my body and figure out where that bit lands in the middle of my back, and then I'm going to just redo this side seam. Once I'd figured out where the side seams needed to go, I pinned them and then I took the top off and I marked out all of those markings on both sides of the top, and then I trimmed off the excess. Next up, I'm going to talk you through how to make a French seam, and in this scenario I'm using a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. If you're making a French seam, you need to make sure you have a little bit of seam allowance to get the desired result. Okay, so I just cut those extra bits off the side seams, and what I'm going to do is do a French seam, which is a way of finishing a seam so that all of the raw edges are enclosed, so you don't actually need to have an alternative machine. You don't need to do any zigzag stitching, you don't need to do any overlocking or serging of your edges. It's really counterintuitive if you've been sewing for a while and you've never done a French seam. It's kind of weird. I promise you it will make sense in the end. So what you do is you get your 2 pieces. So this is my front piece and this is the left side piece. And usually when you do a normal seam, you do right sides together. You stitch it and it looks lovely. When you do a French seam, basically there are 2 steps to a French seam. The first one is stitching the wrong sides together. Then you press everything and then you get to a point where you stitch the right sides together. And what do you know? The raw edge gets encased inside there, and your garment looks amazing from the outside. Okay, I'm going to start with a 1/4 inch seam on the raw edge. So now that that's done, you can see that it looks kind of weird, and I've got this raw edge on the outside. If you need to, you might need to trim this a little bit, but the next step is to press it and then fold over and put the right sides together, as you can see. And then what happens is you stitch 3/8 of an inch from the edge. So if you're using centimeters, if you're using whatever seam allowance you're using, you just need to divide it into two parts. The first one being a little bit smaller than the second one you're going to do. So maybe you're doing, I guess, 5/8 of an inch. That's kind of like a 15 middle hem, like a 1.5 centimeter. So what you could do is do a 0.5 centimeter to begin with on the wrong sides together, press everything, flip the right sides together, and then do 1 centimeter. And there you go. That's how you get a French seam. So you can see that as I'm pinning this, if I open it out, you'll see that it's kind of landing at the stitching line that I drew with the chalk. So once it's all together, it'll line up in the right spot. And there you go. That's what it looks like from the front. That's what it looks like from the insides. A lovely French seam. You're very welcome. I hope that that was easy to follow. If it wasn't, let me know. I'll do a real tutorial. Okay, I'm gonna whip through the other side. As I said, I'm gonna finish off the bottom edge and the armhole edge, and I'll join you. I'll be back to talk about how I'm gonna do the skirt. To finish the raw edges of the bottom of the top and the armholes, I just folded up about 1/4 inch twice, and I pressed everything, and then I top stitched all the way along just to make sure it was all nice and neat. I didn't have a lot of fabric to work with, so that's why I did this method. I thought it turned out pretty good. I could just gather this whole thing and just call it a skirt. When I was getting onto the skirt, I realized that I might be able to keep the pockets intact. It just took me a few minutes of problem solving to get there, but we made it. I've cracked it. I've lined up the dots. The dots are joining. Haha, do you get the joke? So I really love having the circles through the middle, and I want to keep the circles in the middle of the skirt, but I also know the utility of keeping the pockets. So what I'm going to do is make a waistband out of the leftovers that I have of the front. I'm going to put some box pleats in the front of the skirt, and then I'm going to elasticate the back and gather. I'm going to elasticate and gather the back. What do you think? I just need to work it out. Editing Steph is here to talk you through this process. First up, I marked out where the box pleats would roughly be, and then I measured precisely to make sure that they were symmetrical to the center front of the skirt, and I pressed them and I basted them down to hold them in place while I did the rest of the waistband. I harvested what I could from the remnants and managed to get some scraps that were about 4 inches wide, just to give myself a little bit of room to work with. I marked out where I needed the circles to line up on the center front and marked that with chalk for later on when I was going to attach everything together. Then I pressed everything and I added a little piece of interfacing to the front section of the waistband as well. For the back waistband, I measured how much skirt would be left over and connected some scraps to get the length. Then I added the elastic. I'm using 1 inch elastic, which I tacked at the center back, and then I pulled the tails out to the ends. The first time around, I left a space near the side seam, which ended up making the waistband way too big. So I unpicked it and I pulled the tails all the way to the side seams. I was pretty tired at this point, so I decided to call it a night and went to bed. Hello, it's the next day. I am feeling refreshed, even though I still look really tired. I had a big sleep. I almost finished everything last night, but I decided just to hit pause because I was so tired. The only thing I really need to finish off today is the waistband. So I've already stitched together the raw edges of the front part of the waistband. Now I'm going to stitch together the raw edges of the back part of the waistband, just so that when I stitch it onto the actual skirt, it doesn't slip or get weird. Because yeah, I always try and skip this step and it never works out for me. And what do you know? I think I'm also gonna pin it. Usually I can just wing it and I don't really need to pin stuff, but I'm gonna pin it. This is crazy, man. This is crazy. The next challenge is going to be to get the waistband onto the skirt. And if you remember earlier, I made these markings on the waistband about where the pattern needs to match up with the front of the skirt so that it lines up nicely with this circle. To attach the waistband to the skirt, I went back to the markings I had made to light up the pattern and I started pinning from there. I actually also basted these together too to make sure that they would be in exactly the right spot when I stitched everything. Then I trimmed off some of the excess from the waistband and I stitched it on, and I finished off the edge with an overlocker, but I forgot to film it. So just trust me, I did do that. Okay, the waistband is done. The only thing is that it's a little loose around the waist and I can't be bothered to take it all apart and redo this piece of elastic. So what I think I'm going to do is, with some of the scraps that I have, I'm going to make like a little tie that will attach at the side that will then just like tie at the back so that it just sort of cinches the waist a little bit. And then if I show you the top, this circle lines up perfectly with the one above, to the point where like even the bottom of this one is missing. So if you've like filled in that bit and this was sitting at the right spot, the pattern just like is continuous, and then my skin underneath, it's like basically the same color as this. I just think it looks really cool. So I'm gonna throw together some ties and then do the neck piece and put the buttons on, and then it'll be done. But first I'm gonna have a coffee because it's time for another coffee. With the ever-dwindling supply of scraps, I managed to salvage enough fabric to make the ties for the sides to tie around at the back. I spliced 3 pieces together for each, and then I stitched them together lengthwise and I turned them out the right way. To attach them at the sides, I just tucked the raw edge in about 1/2 inch and then I stitched them on so that when they're tied at the back you can't see the stitching because it folds over the top of it. I also made some small belt loops so the ties could feed through and hold up the back elasticated part of the waistband because it was kind of sagging down a bit. To add the collar to the top, I unpicked the bias edge to give me just a little bit more height to work with, and I did the same for the sleeve cuff leftovers as well. I had one good piece for the center and I cut some extra pieces for the tails. I added these and pressed the seams open, and then I added another line of stitching on each side just to give the tie a little bit of extra strength. I folded the raw edges in about 1/4 inch and I pressed them in on both sides, then in half lengthwise, and I pressed everything. And to stitch it all together, I sandwiched the top of the top in between and top stitched all the way along to enclose everything.
Everything was pretty much done at this point, so it was time to add buttons. I tried and failed to colour some buttons, and then I agonised over some other buttons at Spotlight, and I ended up buying some that were cute. I brought them home and they were just way too big for the buttonholes I'd already made, so that was a bit of a fail. So then it was back to the stash, which I have this little jar of buttons, to pick out a few more of the right size. It's basically back to where I started with the small white ones. I might change these out at some point, but it'll be good enough for now.
As you can tell from this ridiculous grin I have on my face right now, I am super duper stoked with how this whole project turned out. I am really happy with myself for transforming this dress into this set that I'm definitely going to get way more wear out of had I left it as a dress. The only issue I'm having is that this necktie, this collar piece, I know that my mother is going to comment on the fit, and you know what? Keep that opinion to yourself. And Louise, that's how I feel about that. Even though I deviated from the original concept for the skirt, I'm glad that I did because it meant that I could preserve the pockets. And I also added the little tie at the back, which means that when I've eaten too much at Christmas lunch, I can give myself a little bit more room and let the waistband out a little bit. It's flexible. Compared to the projects that I made kind of at this time last year, I feel like my sewing skills have really come a long way, and I'm really proud of myself for paying attention to the details and really refining those elements. I think I will change out the buttons eventually because they don't quite go with the rest of the top, but honestly, I'm just happy that this is together and that I can wear it on Christmas. I have so many more plans for the new year for sharing sewing projects and other lifestyle and DIY things. I won't have uni next year, so I'll be able to spend way more time with you guys, making projects, making videos, and sharing all of these cool things with you. And I really hope that you stick around. So yeah, if you want more sewing coming at ya, you know what to do. And until the next time I see you, bye!